I'd like to call the August 5, 2020 regular meeting of the Holland City Council to order. We do have a number of people who are here in the audience, and please do note that due to COVID-19 restrictions, it's good to see everybody's wearing a mask. Everybody is sitting 6 feet or more apart, and it looks like we may have what is now a full house for us here at this time. I would like to start with a roll call. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Byrd. Peters. Here. Garcia.
Here.
Trethewey.
Here.
Arnshorst. Here. Corbin. Here. Hoekstra.
Here.
Raymond. Here. Mayor Box.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. We're going to start tonight's meeting the way that we have for quite a long time. We're going to start with an opening prayer by Councilmember Garcia this evening, immediately followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. We'd love to have you join us if you would.
Good and loving and just Father, we're grateful for the opportunity to be able to pray to you this evening together, leading the council and also the community. And there's a lot to ask for. There's a lot to need, but there's also a lot to be grateful for. And this evening, we're grateful firstly for our health, for the fact that we're able to stand here together this evening, knowing that many others have not been so fortunate, Lord God, and as this pandemic continues to advance and kind of play out, God, we ask that you would continue to sustain life, that you would continue to sustain strength in those who are on the front lines, who are facing some of the toughest challenges of their lifetime, and that you would give us the discernment, us as leaders and those that lead in other capacities, to know how to navigate this for the well-being of our nation, and of our neighbors across the globe. And I also pray for this evening and for every time we gather, really, that you would grant us wisdom, that you would grant us an ability to discern, that you would grant us humility to be able to see perspectives and things that we're not privy to ourselves, but that we would be able to see other perspectives, and we would have the compassion towards those who think differently, who live differently, who believe differently, Lord, and that you would grant us the courage to be able to act justly, that we would have the courage to be honoring to you and honoring to our neighbors, God, in this process. I pray these things in Christ's name.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next are our consent agenda items. These items are considered to be relatively routine. They have been reviewed by council members prior to the meeting, and we're going to read them off. And if any member of the audience would like to have an item removed from the consent agenda and placed onto the regular agenda, you'll have the opportunity to do that. And also, council will have the opportunity to do that as well. And if there aren't any items that are removed, or for those items that aren't removed, we will then be voting on all of the consent agenda items with one vote. Kathy, would you please review the consent agenda for us?
4A, absence excused, Councilmember Byrd. 4B, approval of minutes, July 15 regular meeting, July 22, 2020 study session. 4C, oaths of office. 4D, Board of Public Works, Unit 8, bus bar replacement. 4E, Board of Public Works, River Avenue Pole Relocation Project Engineering Contract. 4F, City Attorney, Ordinance Amendment, repeal of Section 14-5 through 14-13 on housing, final adoption August 19, 2020. 4G, City Clerk, claims filed against the city. 4H, City Clerk, annual license renewals 2020-2021. 4I, traffic change, parking change on West 10th Street and on East 26th Street. 4J, request to award bid for dangerous structure at 29 East 18th Street. 4K, purchasing, award bid for holiday lighting in downtown and Holland Centennial Park. 4L, finance, set public hearing to amend GDK Brownfield Plan for August 19, 2020. 4M, purchasing, declare items as surplus. 4N, purchasing, approve vehicle bid. 4O, human resources, amendment to the Priority Health Medical Plan. 4P, human resources, amendment to the InfiniSource Flexible Spending Account Agreement. 4Q, revocable license agreement, projecting sign 62 West 8th Street. 4R, revocable license agreement, projecting sign 30 West 8th Street. 4S, Public Art Advisory Committee, application for donation of outdoor memorial, Holland Area Veterans Council. 4T, fiscal year 2021 strategic plan and business plan.
Thank you, Kathy. Is there anyone in the public who would like to have an item removed from the consent agenda and placed in its regular place on the regular agenda? Seeing none. Council members, anyone like to remove something from the consent agenda? Yes, Lynn?
Yeah, I'd like to remove 12E 6.7, please.
12E,
It's under T.
under T. Thank you. That's much more helpful to me. And that is the strategic plan and business plan?
Yeah.
Okay. 12E 6.2, want to put that in the right spot here. All right. Any other council members like to remove something from the consent agenda and have it placed on the regular agenda? And the only item I know, and I'm not sure because I've not done this before, there is one typographical error in one of the items, and it's under item N. Just for those people who are looking, it's actually within the suggested caption motion recommendation. It's recommended that City Council approve the purchase of 3, and then in parentheses it says 2 2020 Ford Escape hybrid all-wheel drive vehicles. We're actually purchasing 3, so we'll make an adjustment to that as well. So without any other further changes, I'll entertain a motion to to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Motion to adopt the agenda as amended and presented.
Support.
Moved by Trethewey, support by Garcia. Is there any discussion? Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Peters? Yes. Garcia?
Yes.
Trethewey?
Yes.
Arnstorst?
Yes.
Corbin? Hoekstra?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Mayor Box?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is public comment. At every public meeting, under the Open Meetings Act of the State of Michigan, we give the public the opportunity to speak to council. We have a number of rules that we follow in this regard. It is, please remember, one-way communication. You will be speaking to council. We will not be responding or answering questions during this time. You may speak on any subject that you would like to, unless that item is going to be something that we're going to have a public hearing on later on in the agenda, and then we'll give you the opportunity to speak at that point on that particular agenda item. We do also limit the time to 5 minutes. If you'll notice, there are 3 lights on the dais in front of me. There's a green light, a yellow light, and a red light. The green light, you're doing very well on time. When the yellow light turns on, that means you have 1 minute left. And when the red light comes on, your time has expired, and we are very strict about that. So we appreciate you keeping to your time. Now, having said that, is there anyone from the public who would like to address council at this time? And when you come forward, please state your name and address for the record.
Ann Henriksen, 338 Royal Park Drive, Zealand. I just want to I've been here so many times, but as I'm out in the public and talking to store owners, employers, people of residence and whatever, people do not know about this ordinance. And when I have spoken to them, I've given them a copy of it so that they are aware of what we have here. Some phone calls that have been made to find out what are you doing here. There's no problem. We have already in the state of Michigan this kind of protection, and federally we're just adopting this in our city, that's all. And they look so troubled about this. Well, what does this mean? What does that mean? So there's a lot of concern because now they're awaking. They're figuring it out. What in the world are we doing in Holland? It is a concern of mine that the old power plant, you made a real big thing of that, and then you had people come in and collaborate. If this ordinance is going to go through, it seems to me the public needs to know what you're expecting from them. They're not going to know. It's in the Sentinel. Most people don't even get the Sentinel. So people of faith, when they look at this, they go, what are they trying to do to us? So now we have a flip of imposing something that people don't understand. They need to know. And I am convinced that they'll be cooperative and caring and go forward with this, but they can't when it's coming from this angle. More education needs to be needed. Herman Miller, you saw it in the paper, and what are they giving their employees? 6 weeks training of how to do diversity, equity, and inclusion so that they're all on board and they know that any kind of human relations violations, now they're made aware of it. The council hasn't done this. People are stymied. They don't even know what's going on. 8th Street people don't know what's going on. I've talked to some of the store owners. Do you know about this ordinance and what this could bring, especially when it comes to lawsuits? So, you know, it's kind of sneaking under the radar here. Did you remember about the drag breakfast brunch? Yeah, I do. I've heard of that. I don't know what happened there. How did it happen? People don't know. So I would think it's your caring council to instruct before you pass this ordinance, not afterwards. Give it time and make sure the population, the one you love so much, is aware. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. And in between each speaker, it's very nice. Thank you, City Manager Van Beek, for sanitizing the podium and the microphone before the next person comes up. Is there anyone else who would like to address council?
Can you tell me where the lights are?
They're right in front of me right here.
Oh, okay. I
Yep.
couldn't see those. We're
He's-
not exactly
but-
compatible.
Mr. Van Beek is actually running the timer, yes. Oh, I see. He was blocking your view before.
Thank
Okay,
you.
but you can see them now.
I can see them.
Okay,
Thank you very
great,
much.
great. And would you please state your name and address
I'm
for the
Linda
record?
Dykstra, and I'm from 16201 Harbor Point Drive, Spring Lake.
Great, thank you.
I'm here tonight both to share information and to encourage you to do your research before you make a decision that you and the Holland community may regret. Permit me to begin by sharing that the American Psychiatric Association publishes and periodically updates the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which lists psychiatric disorders, diagnoses, codes, and gives their descriptions. The most recent edition was 2013, wherein gender dysphoria is described. The first paragraph captures the issue. Gender dysphoria involves a conflict between a person's physical or assigned gender and the genders with which he, she, they identify. People with gender dysphoria may be very uncomfortable with the gender they were assigned, sometimes described as being uncomfortable with their body, particularly developments during puberty, or being uncomfortable with the expected roles of their assigned gender. Now please permit me to read a couple of paragraphs from my March letter to the editor regarding an article in the Wall Street Journal. Pennsylvania State evolutionary biologist Colin M. Wright and the University of Manchester developmental biologist Emma H. Hilton penned an article in the Wall Street Journal on February 14, 2020, entitled, "The Dangerous Denial of Sex." They state, in humans, reproductive anatomy is unambiguously male or female at birth more than 99.9% of the time. No third type of sex exists in humans, and therefore there is no spectrum or additional sexes beyond male and female. Sex is binary. denying the reality of biological sex and supplanting it with subjective gender identity is not merely eccentric academic theory. It raises serious human rights concerns for vulnerable groups, including women, homosexuals, and children. And that's my greatest concern right there. Don't you wonder how we got from unambiguously male or female at birth to the gender dysphoria diagnosis? We can primarily thank our educational system and media. Please permit me to share a few facts from a recent article by Tony Perkins. 1, LGBT activists are manipulating young minds at ages they cannot properly comprehend sexuality and gender. 2, the long-running PBS Kids series, Clifford the Big Red Dog, featured a reoccurring same-sex couple. The Human Rights Campaign and the National Education Association teamed up to create Jazz and Friends National Day of School and Community, an annual event in February promoting the book I Am Jazz, about a boy who believes he was born in the wrong body. 4, South Dakota's governor caved to the pressure of big business and added to the defeat of a measure that would protect minors from dangerous gender transition drugs and surgeries. If the Holland City Council and residents want to truly support children and help those dealing with gender dysphoria, they and all of us need to be proactive and become educated about what is going on around us. All of us, particularly the City Council, need to research and understand gender dysphoria, review the books used in the grade school and high school classrooms and placed in school libraries, become more aware of the PBS programs for children, know about what the NEA is doing, and most importantly, understand the absolute need to replace confusing gender options by teaching biology and sex education based on 2 sexes, male and female. Until all of this is completed and the City Council and the residents have finished their research and understand what is going on, particularly in our educational system and with our children, please do not vote
Mr. Mayor,
until
that's
you've done it.
5 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Your time has expired.
I'm going to take this opportunity right now because of an unfortunate situation that we had with a little bit of noise. If you have a cell phone, please silence it or turn it off at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And would you please state your name and address for the record?
Yes, sir. My name is Calvin Dykstra, same address as my wife, and I don't know if she said it or not, but she's a PhD in psychology, and I've had to deal with all of her very good opinions for 52 years, and it has stead me well. So I wanted you to know that I agree with everything that she said. I am opposed to council adopting Ordinance Chapter 25, Protection Against Discrimination.
Thank you, Cal. And would you please state your name and address for the record?
Marcia Underwood, 217 West McKinley, Zeeland, Michigan.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for this opportunity to speak before all of you. I'm going to read a letter that I previously had sent to Mayor Box and all the city council members, but now I am addressing it to all of you listening tonight. The letter reads as follows. To Mayor Box and all city council members, it has been truthfully said, the ground is level at the foot of the cross. Salvation has been provided for all who will humble themselves, turn from sin, and to Jesus Christ, confessing him as Lord. In a sense, the ground is level at the foot of the Constitution. All citizens of the United States of America are guaranteed the same rights, which are freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the right to keep and bear arms, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, freedom of petition. If we believe that our rights have been violated, we have the ability to take our issue to the courts, and there it is decided upon and a ruling made. We cannot expect all to embrace our way of believing and living. Our feelings do not constitute rights violated. Special or additional rights cannot and must not be given to any that would in turn infringe upon or deny others their rights. This is the only way we can live in a just society. Therefore, careful consideration must be taken regarding the full implications and final outcome before any ordinance is altered or replaced. Respectfully submitted by me, Marcia Underwood.
Thank you, Marcia. We would ask all of the members with their hands, please do cover both your mouth and your nose with your masks, especially when you're coming up to the podium. We are in the midst of a pandemic, and we'd rather not be a place where anything could be spread. So we appreciate that. Does someone else like to come and address council? And would you please state your name and address for the record?
I'm Pastor Bernard Timmerman from Zion Chapel here in Holland. I'm reading here the ordinance, I think as it is probably in the old one, to a religious education institution or educational institution operated, supervised, or controlled by a religious institution or organization which limits its admission or gives preference to an applicant of the same religion. I would take that as membership or hiring and staff or something like that. But one of my concerns is freedom of speech. We have come to the place where, as I just read recently, homosexual marriage, 15 years ago, 60% were against it, and now 60% are for it. So we have sort of changed positions. And this may sound like a very crude statement, but sometimes you've heard the statement, take the bull by the horns and not by the tail. And we are being led to follow, to give place. And there is a place for that. There is a place for everyone. We're all sinners together. But there's also a limit. And I would take the example of a drunken man. He has rights, many rights, but he doesn't have all rights. He doesn't have a right on the road, and there's limited to that. But my concern would be freedom of speech. If we continue this way in the city, am I still allowed to say that the Bible says, such are not in the kingdom of heaven? And it isn't that one alone. There's 10 more listed. You and I, everybody here, we're together. But we have to give the same message to all. And I would take the example of a cancer patient. If a person has cancer, we don't tell them they're healthy. We don't tell them they can do the same things. We urge them to do something in life. And take the county south of us, Elgin has a lower death rate. Earlier, more people die young. And it was on the Sentinel some time ago that it was because of the high influx of the homosexuals, and they spread death one to another. We have masks on so we don't spread the virus, but we allow them to spread death dealing to each other. And as it grows worse, as it is in the Netherlands, they have the older men wanting to have more rights with the boys. So we are, like I said, being led along. So I'm concerned that we keep our rights to tell them the truth. And the truth is a message of love. Love in Christ. Paul says to those in Ephesus, listing those 10 sins, yours, mine, and theirs, such were some of you. But you are washed, you are sanctified in the name of the Lord Jesus and by the power of the Spirit. That's what we need today. That's what our first mayor here, Finaldi, left us. He said he turned this over from God. It's our training place, and we need to keep on learning the right way. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernard. And would you please state
Hi.
your name and address for the record?
Yeah, Kirk Leskowski, 1188 62nd Street, Fenville, Michigan. I was here for a couple meetings previous, but I wasn't able to speak and wasn't prepared. One of the first ones I went to was when the house was packed with a whole bunch of people on this side before the virus, when there was a lot of people allowed in here right next to each other. And I noticed that it was, many of them were from out of town. They weren't from Holland, and they had prepared messages, and they had a lot of their own facts, and they had doctor this behind my name and pastor so-and-so, and had all this information that really brought all this message to you guys and made you feel like and seem like that the community of Holland was represented there, and that's what we want to have. But as most of the speakers already said tonight, we really don't believe that this is what the people of Holland would vote for if they had this in front of them and were able to read it all and understand it all. As a Christian man, I have beliefs in the Bible, and like some of the others have said, that the homosexual lifestyle, the LGBTQ lifestyle, is actually an immoral lifestyle that we do not believe in and accept as morally equivalent. Having said that, I don't believe that people that have that lifestyle should be discriminated against either. So we have a clashing of beliefs. We have a clashing of ideals. And we have a First Amendment right as Christians to exercise our religious freedom, and the government cannot infringe upon it. So what are we going to do? We've got one side that believes one way and another side that believes another. And yet, as some of them have also said, we believe that the love of God and the love of Christ can overcome any sin. So as I declare before you, I believe in my heart, like the Bible speaks of in more than one place, that the homosexual lifestyle is a sexually perverted lifestyle. It is not morally equivalent to being heterosexual, but God gives forgiveness and mercy on any kind of sin. And that includes adulterers, that includes liars, that includes fornicators, which some of us are and were. So we're not saying as Christians that we're better than anybody else. And for all those people who were felt judged and put down and felt to be less than an equal person by Christians who were judgmental and prideful, dear Lord, I ask forgiveness on their behalf, because that is not the message of Christ. His message is a message of love. And he loves every single person in every single category of sin, and he offers us a way out of escape. And that's through repentance and turning to Christ. And so I just have some comments about it. Number one, as far as this item, as far as this ordinance goes, I didn't really see any proof of discrimination from the groups that was here talking. They had stories, and I didn't see any real concrete proof that there's a whole lot of discrimination going on against LGBTQ people in Holland. I think most people do have love in their hearts for all people and wouldn't normally judge people for that reason. Although I can say that I've been discriminated against in a job once when I worked for Priority Health in in Grand Rapids, because of being a Christian. During the Trump voting and the first time in 2016, I said something positive about President Trump and didn't know that, and so all these people went against me, and I ended up getting laid off and all that. So I've understood that persecution can come even against Christians, because people have different beliefs. But so I would ask the question of, where's the discrimination happening? Number two, I believe there's already state protection in place for people that have issues. Like Marcia said, if there's somebody who gets discriminated against and they believe that their rights have been challenged or broken or infringed upon, they can take it to court. But it sounds like with these punishments of a $500 fine and the ability to actually revoke a business license over one infraction in this is going to cause business people to really, not be able to move forward with faith in hiring people. They're going to be afraid. What if what if you have an employee who's gay, and he's a terrible employee and doesn't show up for work half the time, or his other issues, and they're going to be afraid to fire him because they'll pull out the LGBTQ card, and they know that they're going to get fined and in trouble for that, when really the reason was something else. So who is ready to make the decisions on whether that person was discriminated against just because they were LGBTQ, but not for other reasons that are, maybe they're not the right person that you would want living in your house because of other things in their life. So there's all kinds of issues that this brings up, and legal issues, when you guys are, wanting to be the ones who make the decision on who gets fined and all that. And so I would ask the question, are you really representing the people in your community? Bring it to a vote. Take time to let the people of Holland really look at this and take time to vote on it. Because I just think it's important that we really understand what's going on here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kurt. And would you please state your name and address for the record?
Ben Martinez, 137 East 22nd Street, Holland, Michigan. I'm here today to also speak about the Protection Against Discrimination Act. First of all, I'd like to say I'm a pastor here in the city of Holland. On the north side, I have a ministry, 633 Ministries, and I'd like to say, I believe that everybody needs protection, okay? First and foremost, everybody has a right to housing, everybody has a right to employment, everybody has a right to these basic necessities, and I'm also a veteran of the United States Army, so I was in Iraq from 03 to 04 and 05 to 06, so I fought for everybody's freedom, I fought for everybody's right, regardless of whether I agree with them or not. Okay, so the only issue that I have with this ordinance is when it comes to section 25.1, where it actually gives various definitions of what sex is, where it talks about sexual orientation, gender expression, and gender identity. And the reason that I have an issue with this is because I've been in cities where I've seen this type of ordinance passed already. For example, in Merriam, Kansas, in Austin, Texas, Denver, Colorado. My uncle lives in Merriam, so they had something similar to this where they expanded not only it didn't just say sex, they expanded it to say exactly that: sexual orientation, gender expression, and gender identity. So one of the cases that came out in Merriam, Kansas was the fact that it was ruled that it was unlawful to discriminate against an individual if that person wanted to use a restroom of the opposite sex. So I'll give you an example. If I'm a man and in the moment I feel emotionally that I'm a woman, I can go into the women's bathroom and you can't tell me I can't go in there. You can't discriminate against me. This was something that actually happened in Merriam, Kansas, and they sided with a person who said, well, I'm emotionally a woman. So to me, this goes, this is not just, about identifying gender. This goes protection to I have daughters, I have young sons, and I wouldn't how, if you have children, how would you feel that I'm a man and I go into the women's bathroom? And the PD comes after me like, hey, I identify as a woman. How are you gonna feel? How are you gonna feel in that moment? You know what I'm saying? Because when you start expanding gender expression, gender identity, your definition here, it says sexual orientation shall mean emotional, romantic, or sexual attractions. So I can say that I'm a woman. It says, regardless of the individual's assigned sex at birth under gender expression or gender identity, it says an internal sense of their own sex. So what's to stop me from doing that and then, and going into the women's bathroom or something of that nature, and somebody telling me you can't do that, then I can go back and say, well, I've been discriminated against. you know, against the PD, against the city of Holland, you know, and and also, you know, my second thing with this is the fact that it says emotional and internal sense of their own self, because, you know, I have an issue with this because as a Christian, I do believe it's wrong. You know, like I said, I fought for everybody's right. If you wanna be that, you can be whatever you wanna be, you know. But in Colorado, they came against the Baker and the Denver case, you know, because emotionally and inside himself, he said, I can't conform to your norms. But emotionally and internally, they said, well, this is what I feel like, you know. And he's already on his second lawsuit. So we're people who support small business. How far are we going to take that, you know, because you're going to kill small business here in Holland when somebody does decide to stand up and say, I don't believe in that. I don't want to support that, you know. So I just want to appeal to you, you know, think it over, man. Like the sexual orientation, the gender expression, and the gender identity, that's not necessary, you know. That you can still protect the homosexual community. You can still protect the gay, the LGBTQ, whatever. You can protect them without having
Mr. Mayor, that's
Yeah,
these
I'm
definitions.
sorry, your time has expired.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ben. And would you please state your name and address for the record?
My name is Jeffrey Sorensen, and I'm the director at Out on the Lakeshore at 451 Columbia Avenue. First, I would just like to thank you for the progress you've made on this non-discrimination ordinance since we first came to you this time around in December. It shows that the council truly has placed a priority on diversity, equity, and inclusion, as was stated previously this year. The second thing I'd like to mention is, in reading through the emailed public comments for today, I noticed that a few people mentioned the recent Supreme Court decision on the definition of sex, implying that this decision meant that the local ordinance wasn't necessary. I'd like to provide a little bit of clarity as to why that simply is not true. It's important to note that this isn't a gay rights issue. This ordinance would provide protections for several other classifications of people, not mentioned in the current existing housing ordinance or the Supreme Court decision, and it provides local access to these groups to make a discrimination claim versus going to the state or the federal level. Also, by aligning with the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, as this ordinance does, it helps protect the city of Holland from lawsuits that stem from this ordinance. And finally, I would just like to simply offer support on behalf of Out on the Lakeshore. Myself and my colleagues, including Reverend Jen Adams, the board chair of Out on the Lakeshore and rector at Grace Episcopal Church, and local psychotherapist Sarah Van Tongeren, as we've had several conversations with multiple experts in this field. And we've asked the same questions that you as a council have been asking. As you do your own due diligence, as I know you have, to make sure that you have all of the information in front of you as you move forward, we've done the same. And as we have in the past, we offer our support. And we offer ourselves as a resource as you continue this process. So thank you, and I will see you again on August 19th.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? Yep. Please step forward and state your name and address for the record.
Council members and Mayor, Brad Slaw, and I reside at 7142 Riley Street in Zeeland. Thank you for allowing me a couple minutes just to give you an update from the Lansing area and see if because I'm your state representative. Maybe you can't tell because I got a mask on, but I'm your state representative for the 90th district, which includes the city of Holland. So just a couple updates from Lansing. One, we're finally done with the 2020 budget. Yay! I mean, we're excited about that. We're not excited about what the numbers came in at, and we're concerned about where we're going in the future. The future, our next view of that future is a revenue estimating conference on August 24 at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. For those of you that are really geeky and want an experience of tuning in to find out what's going on with the revenue stuff, it's online, so you can actually watch the revenue estimating conference starting at 3 o'clock. And from that, then we need to work on our 2021 budget. That was supposed to have been done by July 1st based on the law. The governor was not ready to give us the numbers back in a timely manner to be able to do that, so we're now having to have it done by October 1st for this coming year. The House has really probably got 4 main focuses that we're going to be looking at between now and the end of the year. One of those obviously is the budget. One of them is education restart. How do we get our kids into school, into learning, that kind of thing. We also have a property tax review and reform as one of our concerns. Just how does property taxes work? And as a former treasurer, I can tell you that it's one of those painful things to me, because I feel like whenever you have to pay your property tax, it's like you didn't really own the property at all, you're paying rent. That's what it feels like to me. So I'm excited about that part. Rural broadband, it would be the fourth leg of that we will be putting effort into between now and then. Obviously, with trying to have kids learn from home and other kinds of things, rural broadband is an important deal. Just a couple continuing themes that I hear as I have been around the community listening to businesses and folks in your community. One is, it's been interesting how many people are struggling with the supply chain and some dysfunction within that supply chain that's happened because of what's going on. It's been amazing to me how many people I've talked to whose businesses will never come back. They are at a point where they paid rent or whatever they did, and they're no longer able to come back. We are going to see a significant number of people who will never have a job in those locations again unless somebody comes in from outside or something else happens. There's many businesses who are cutting hours and staff. Hayworth in our community is doing that very thing. They're cutting both staff and they're cutting hours for the people that they're keeping right at the moment. And then there's a significant impact on lives. Just mentally and emotionally, those folks are struggling right now. One of the fascinating side effects, though, that as I've been doing continued research on what's happening, is that we're seeing, and it's something that we can actually rejoice about in this whole pandemic thing, is that we're seeing a significant reduction in SIDS deaths, so those infant children deaths. That if you look at the graph on that, it's plunging, just plunging. And I don't know why, but I mean, there's a bunch of theories about it, but nobody really knows at this point in time. It's just one of the interesting positive side effects that's going on. And with that, I'll yield my time.
Great. Thank you, Brad. And would you please state your name and address for the record?
Yes, my name is Thomas Dunkelberger, and my address is 2260 Woodlark Drive, Holland. That's on the north side. And I don't have a lot of prepared message, but I wanted to just make a couple of comments. First of all, I'm a school bus driver, and one of the things that we do is bring kids into the city in various places for field trips and things like that. And I remember when we went through this 6, 8, 10 years ago, one of the things that I feared then is that once that ordinance gets put in place, it's like the camel getting its nose under the tent, and things start to happen. And it was referred to a little bit earlier that talk about men that want to use women's bathrooms and things like that. And that becomes a real reality, and it's been proven in many different instances around the country. I, as a school bus driver, I just love those kids dearly. And matter of fact, I feel a responsibility to keep them safe. And if this city gets into a situation where they're allowing men that think they're women to go into women's rooms and things like that. I can't protect those kids. And I don't know what I would do, but I'll talk to the school because it's important that the school knows that we have to be able to protect the kids when we take them on field trips. And maybe it means we've got to take 2 or 3 people, men and women, on field trips. I don't know, but it's going to create a big problem with that. Also, the last time it went around, I was able to get in contact with, and I want to bring this up because I heard a comment about the council runs a risk of lawsuits that potentially can come up. And last time we went around on this, I was able to get a hold of Matt Staver at Liberty Council, and he assured me that this council would have his organization at their disposal if it gets involved with anything that relates with the homosexual and religious aspects of it. So I think that's something to keep in the back of your mind. You don't really have to worry about lawsuits. There are a lot of resources that will help you get through any difficulties that come up. So it's important that you do weigh the ordinance that you're looking at very, very carefully. Come up with the solutions that you think is best for the community. I would dearly like to see you put it out for a vote to the community because it's important that people are aware of it and that they embrace the things that you're doing, and I would ask that you do that. Beyond that, I just want to let you know that as a Christian, I will pray for this city council. I'll pray for the city of Holland. And hopefully we'll get past the coronavirus as well as get through the decisions that you need to make here. I thank you.
Thank you, Thomas.
My name is David Rivera. I stay in 1205 Cranberry Court, Holland, Michigan. And I'm here to stand with my brothers and sisters in Christ and 110%. And I believe you guys should turn to the Bible, man, and read it before you make a decision. I'm gonna leave it like that, real short.
All right. Thank you, David. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time?
Bob Ashby, 967 Songbird Lane. I hope you enjoy my covering. And this is not anything personal, but I'm frustrated too by the blindness of religious people and the unchallenged animus of the irreligious. I'm frustrated that religious people not only defy the entire history of Western civilization's most basic mores built on the faith they claim to love, but would also insult the living church and her fidelity to the scriptures that nurtured her birth and maturity over the last 2,000 years. I'm frustrated with the majority of the council, which steadfastly refuses, after multiple public appeals, to be serious. There has been absolutely no discussion concerning the merits of local gay rights demands in terms of verifiable evidence. There has been no challenge to the validity of sexual behavior as an equivalent to racism or a justification for so-called white privilege. There has been no discussion on the merits of instituting a legal remedy for conditions of self-perception rather than observable reality. There has been no effort to find out if people involved in all the claims actually ever did anything themselves about their own grievances through the systems that already exist. During the July 15th council session, I witnessed the majority's effort to rule basically by the fears, feelings, and what-ifs of a small vocal minority. I witnessed an effort to appeal to sad statistics of depression and anxiety and paranoia and suicide within the LGBTQIA demographic, all mostly blaming it on social oppression. This was all without so much as an honest word about all the other factors involved, the incredible deep dynamics of a lifestyle that pits its participants against their own natural birth, the norms of society and familial relationships, of the standards of conduct of the entire Western culture for millennia. Does the gay community experience hurts? Sometimes deep ones, absolutely. But to blame those sufferings on society at large is irresponsible, disingenuous, and ultimately corrosive to the lives of those very proponents they seem to want to help. I, too, have been maligned, disparaged, insulted, accused of racism, xenophobia, homophobia, of making deceptive statements, and all of this publicly before thousands of readers. My opinions have been censored. Shall I now demand an ordinance remedy to protect me from being insulted and looked on disparagingly when I wear my Trump hat? Shall I seek protection because I'm afraid, and my wife is really, that sooner or later someone's going to egg our house or key our car or even deny me services? I'm not allowed to declare that conscience and spiritual convictions matter. If I do, I'm irrelevant, hateful, ignorant, and bigoted. If I'm not allowed to operate my own business according to the dictates of my conscience, but I can dilute other people's businesses and destroy them according to the dictates of my now socially accepted prejudices. I'm not allowed to protect historical Judeo-Christian values as held throughout our nation's history, but I can tear them down. I'm not allowed to have an opinion about homosexual lifestyles because I believe that straight is normal and best. But if I don't proclaim an opinion, I'm the reason people are oppressed. The fact is that this proposed ordinance, because of current judicial activism, contains no effectual protections other than for one special interest group. Protections on the basis of religion does not cover it because the First Amendment protections are becoming meaningless, thanks to our Supreme Court. Now the council wants to add their nail to the coffin. As I've said before, this is not about liberty, but an endorsement of a lifestyle. The bottom line intentions of the gay rights movement is well documented, and its future intentions are evident. Passing this ordinance will act as an act of governance on the basis of ideology and fable, but never let the facts get in the way.
Thank you, Bob. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? And would you please state your name and address for the record?
Mike Osterhaus from 20 East 30th Street, Holland, Michigan. I don't have a prepared message, but I do have some thoughts. I have to agree with Ann when she spoke about the people don't know about it. The people need to know more about this before you decide to put this into the operation. I also talked to Dr. Holmes of the Human Relations, and I asked her how many incidents there has been in the last 6 years. She said there has not been any incidents. So why are we having a Chapter 25 discrimination ordinance? Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? And would you please state your name and address for the record?
Margarito Lozano, 736 Ottawa Avenue, Holland, Michigan. I'm just coming in agreement with the young man that just came from this stating, you know what I mean, that there's a lot of people out here in Holland that are unaware of this ordinance coming. You know, it was brought to my attention a couple of days, as a matter of fact, and I reached out to a few pastors and a lot of Christian folks that I've, you know what I mean, I congregate with, and, you know, they're unaware of this as well. So, like people are saying, you know what I mean, we need to bring this to the attention of Holland, you know what I mean, so that they're aware and that they have understanding of what's going on. And not only that, you know, I have 2 granddaughters, and as Pastor Ben said, you know what I mean, I would hate to be somewhere here in Holland and have some gentleman come and, you know what I mean, say he's emotionally a woman and have him enter a restroom with my granddaughter. That would, you know what I mean, just to think of how they would feel or how they're gonna act, or, you know what I mean, the things that they're gonna have to go through experiencing something like this. So before you guys make a decision, I just ask that you do allow the city of Holland, the people of the city of Holland, to understand what's going on.
Thank you, Marito. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? And would you please state your name and address for the record?
My name is Art DeLeon, 639 West 21st Street. Yeah, honestly, man, I've been sitting here struggling with this. I didn't know too much about this. You know, like, I'm just trying to figure which way I want to approach this. You know, I've been discriminated against. I've been looked down upon. I've been frowned upon. I've done wrong things as a man. So I can identify with people saying that they've been judged for something. I can identify with that. But there's still a mindset that has to be renewed for somebody before they take their place. Like, I can't come sit on the city council without knowledge of it. I can't come identify with this council and not go according to your ways. I can't, you know what I mean by that? I just can't agree with somebody that's trying to change scripture. You know, we have a firm belief that we stand on. You know, I just can't, you know, I can't agree with that. You know, as a father too, man, I was a young child when there was a transgender person that molested me when I was a child. So I have fear for my kids when it comes to stuff like this too, man. I mean, you know, like, you got victims that come and stand out. I've been victimized before. I mean, I know that's not everybody, and not everybody can be held accountable for that. And there's not always repeat offenders. But at the same time, man, like, you know, I got little girls too. I got sons, man, and that's a big concern of mine. You know, I don't want them sharing a restroom with another man or a woman, you know what I'm saying? Like, because little boys been victimized by older women too. So, like, I had to stand against that, man. Like, yeah, that's what I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Art. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? Seeing none, I will close the public comment period. Next item on the agenda are the e-comments that we've received at publiccomment@cityofholland.com. Something that we've instituted during this time of COVID is we've created an email address, and again, that's publiccomment@cityofholland.com, where you can send your email comments if you're not comfortable coming here in person to the meeting. And for those of you who may have sent comments later today, we do have a cutoff period that's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the day of the meeting. So if you sent an email that came after 3 o'clock today, that will be included in the next meeting's agenda. But at this time, I would entertain a motion to accept the public comments that we have received.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Hoekstra. Is there support? Support by Mr. Trethewey. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next, item number 10, adoption of ordinances, proposed ordinance, Chapter 25, Protection Against Discrimination. Final reading postponed to the August 19, 2020 regular meeting, and I believe I'm entertaining a motion to table this to the next regular meeting, am I not?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Trethewey. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Hoekstra. Any discussion? Yes.
Just a word of explanation for those that were not here 2 weeks ago. We feel it very important that all 9 members be able to vote on this. We have one member that's absent this evening, by vacation. He was nice enough to tell us that a couple of weeks ago, so we made the decision to put this off so that all 9 of us could be here. Nothing more, nothing less than that.
Thank you, Mr. Trethewey. Any other discussion or comments from council? All right, Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Garcia,
Yes.
Trethewey,
Yes.
Arnsworst,
Yes.
Corbin, Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Peters, Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next item is item 12A3, resolution to tentatively award anaerobic digester construction contract. Mr. Van Beek.
Yeah, I'm going to invite up guests from the Holland Board of Public Works, both Dave Koster and I believe there's Joel Davenport. And they're going to go through, I know that you've heard about this project in the past, but they're going to go through kind of the background that brought us to this point and also show the rationale that they've gone through and also the recommendation from the Board of Public Works Board to proceed with this construction contract this evening. So thank you to both Dave and Joel.
Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council. It's great to be with you this evening. It's a very important project for the community that's in front of us here, and it's good to have an opportunity to explain to the viewers at home a little bit about the background and rationale for this project. And as Keith mentioned, I have along with me Joel Davenport. Joel's our operations director, and Joel's responsible for all of our plant-related functions, which are, electric production, wastewater treatment, and water treatment. So we're going to tag team a little bit on this presentation. I think there's some slides. I don't know if it's being advanced to that point yet.
Right
Joel,
there,
maybe
Joel.
you can hopefully that's early on the slide deck. There we go.
All right.
Excellent. So we're going to tag team a little bit as we go through this. Joel give a little bit of background and some of the lead up to this, and I'll walk us through some of the financial evaluation and some visuals around the size of the digester and how it fits into the site. So Joel, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Sounds good. Yeah, I think probably the best place to start is just kind of a reminder on how we got to where we are today. There was several big changes we were seeing, largely on challenges with regards to getting rid of the solids generated at the water reclamation facility. Just as a little background, when you're through the process of treating the water, you have solids that are being removed, and also you're generating solids that come out as well. We have to dispose of those at some point as part of the process. So we have 2 ways of handling that. One way is we dewater it and dispose of it in a landfill. The other way is we thicken it, treat it to what's called a Class B biosolid, and then inject it in farm fields as a fertilizer. Right now it's about half and half, the split between those 2 methods. One thing we've seen in kind of recent years that was a big trigger here is large increases in costs of disposal. The landfill in particular is now up over 600% since 2008. For frame of reference on that, the tipping fee per ton of the sludge cake was about $8 in 2008. It's now a little over $57. The hauling fee to take each dumpster to the landfill in 2008 was $110. It's now around $1,000. So just for frame of reference of that increase. Similarly, over that time span, we've seen large increases in the costs of taking it to land application as well. Not nearly that large of an increase. It's up about 65%.
but that's still substantial in that landfill used to be the lower cost alternative. In recent years, they've been pretty even. Now land application is actually the lower cost, even with those increases. But going along with land application, there's some challenges with that going forward. One of which is just storage of it on site, just because of the amount of solids that are generated. If we were to build the plant new today, what we have for storage on site is only about 40% of what would be required. So it creates challenges in particular in winter and summer when you can't get on farm fields. We just don't have anywhere to store it, which means we have to go to landfill. There's also some additional challenges with land application just on availability of fields. That's a lot of it's competition with alternative fertilizers, obviously chemical fertilizer, but also there's a lot of agricultural use around here, so there's a lot of manure available for farm fields as well. And then of course there's also always new regulatory things arising. I think everybody's familiar with PFAS and kind of at least been hearing about that. That's not necessarily a regulatory challenge for our solids, but there is a public perception thing that comes into play with some of the farmers, and we have lost a few fields as a result of that. So all these things combine to continue to create challenges for that disposal. So a little background on, again, how we got to today. Most of you will probably remember here a few years ago, we did another major project at the reclamation facility. It was an improvement project that did include improvements to the solids handling. At that point, what we were really doing was replacing the existing equipment that was at the end of its useful life and really undersized for today's demands. So about half of that project was to replace our equipment that we use for dewatering and thickening the equipment. Nothing we're proposing today does anything to change really those processes. Those are still processes needed. This is just something added to it. So kind of as we started seeing these increases in prices, kind of the next thing that we did in 2018, the BPW did a tactical action to look at alternatives for really mitigating this cost. We looked at quite a few different options, including the digestion that we're looking at doing now, drying. We looked at actually taking on land application ourselves rather than doing a contract operator. At the end of the day, getting through that analysis, it really became apparent that anaerobic digestion looked like the best alternative forward, both financially and sustainably, which we'll get into a little bit here. So going forward, the recommendation kind of out of that analysis was to look at the anaerobic digestion further. So then the next year, we actually did a conceptual design to see what kind of costs we'd be looking at. And we also did a pilot study to make sure that the process would actually work with our solids. And on this kind of next slide here, there's actually a picture of the process of the pilot study. This is just a little lab benchtop where they mimic what goes on in the anaerobic digester. And what's really happening in the digester, you're taking an absence of oxygen, you're mixing those solids up and they break down, and the volatile portion of those solids actually break down into a biogas that then can be captured and reused for energy. So we went through the pilot test. Everything looked really good, so it was kind of, okay, let's continue this on to the next step. That kind of gets into the scope of what we're seeking approval for today. So the project that we ended up selecting is an anaerobic digester, but then we also have that paired with an aerobic digester after the anaerobic digestion, which normally are kind of two different ways of accomplishing the same thing, but the value here in putting the aerobic digestion after the anaerobic is largely to protect the plant. In the anaerobic digestion process, it liberates a lot of the nitrogen from the solids in the form of ammonia. When we take the liquid out of that, if we just allow that to return to the plant, that could create issues with our discharge going out to the lake. So we needed to do something to treat that ammonia. So the post-aerobic digestion does that. And then another side benefit of it, it also does a further reduction in the solids that we have at the site. So the two systems combined, we're looking at around 50% reduction in the solids generated, which obviously takes a lot of the pressure off finding a disposal route for that. Another thing important to note about the digestion system that we're putting in place is what's called a Class A system. I mentioned right now we do Class B biosolids. Class A takes it really to another level of treatment. What that gains you is a lot more options for disposal. So a Class B biosolid like we have today has to go on fields that are not for direct human consumption. A Class A biosolid really can go most anywhere soil can go. So you can go onto fields that are for direct human consumption. You can go onto yards. I mean, if anyone's ever used mill organite, that is a Class A biosolid from Milwaukee. So that's more the product, and they take a little extra step with drying it, but that's kind of the product we're going to. Some additional benefits here. I mean, talk about the reduction in solids, which is really the big thing from a cost saving standpoint, but there's a couple other big ones that come into play when we're looking at this and that kind of come into play when Dave walks through the financials. One is reduction in chemical demands. Right now, to get to that Class B biosolid, we have to feed lime to raise the pH and kind of, that breaks down or attacks the pathogens so that it's safe to apply to the fields. Well, the digestion process does the same thing, so we no longer need the lime, which right now is about $160,000 a year that we'll be able to do away with. And then a huge one, again, is this biogas that's generated from the digester. So also part of this project is a combined heat and power system. So we're actually going to have a 550 kilowatt generator, which we're adding a lot of load with the digester electrically, but this will still cut back from our existing electric demands at the plant roughly in half. That electric that's generated. And then we're also taking the heat off that system to heat the process because the digester operates, it's actually a two-step. The first step is at 140 degrees. The second step's at 98 degrees, roughly around 100. So we're using that heat to do that as well as heat some of the buildings on site. Wanted to talk briefly about the selected technology. The more conventional digesters that you'll see look a lot like the tanks you'll see out on a lot of farm fields, like the Harvestor, Aquastor type tank. The steel tanks, they might be concrete, but that same shape with some sort of often membrane cover. In this case, we're going with an egg-shaped digester, which is a large welded steel tank. The big advantages to that, there's several of them, and that some of this comes down to our location, that it's very advantageous. One, it fits into a tighter footprint. With the conventional digesters, you have to install 2 of them because they have to be taken out of service at least every 5 years for cleaning. With the egg, there's a lot of them that have been in service for 20 plus years without requiring cleaning, which is advantageous from a footprint standpoint, but also very advantageous when you look at where the plant's located, because when you open up something like a digester for cleaning, there's obviously going to be some odors associated with that, something we'd like to minimize. Again, the other thing with this being a solid welded steel tank, some people might recall some of the issues that happened in Lowell. They had a digester and they had a lot of odor complaints. That was that membrane cover tore. And so it was allowing a lot of the odors out. With the welded steel, you really can't have that issue. And then just improved mixing with the shape of the egg also allows for additional solids breakdown and better gas production. And then again, the biogas utilization, I mentioned that we're looking at putting in a generator and to generate the electricity and the heat. I think with that, Dave?
Yeah, thanks, Joel. A couple comments I'll make before getting into the actual, some additional things here that I think are important before we get into the financial analysis is that from a sustainability aspect, Joel's talked about, solids reduction, that's less truck traffic going to fields, going to disposal sites. There's a lot of benefit from a greenhouse gas perspective. Wear and tear on roads, there's more sustainable impact there. The energy savings that we're going to have on site is also greenhouse gas reduction. If you think about the ultimate fate of this is a methane generation. Methane is a much more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, so by capturing it and creating electricity with it, and then using the waste heat from that will really have an environmentally beneficial project with that as well. Just as we did with Holland Energy Park, this has been a very thoughtful process. I think you're hearing a lot of that through Joel's description of all the different things that are going on. We actually implemented a framework. It's very similar to the sustainability framework that the city and the BPW use on large capital projects. But for our big projects like this and Holland Energy Park, we actually follow a framework that's been put out there by the Institute for Sustainable Infrastructure, ISI. They call it their Envision. It's a rating, it's like LEED for infrastructure projects. If you thought about a LEED building and all the efficiency that goes along with that, this is for infrastructure projects. We are pursuing that certification for this project as well, which makes us go through a very thoughtful process of checklists on a lot of things, including this natural world impact, through the greenhouse gas reduction, but also educational opportunities with it. We see this site really as best practices, state of the art, just like Holland Energy Park is, and we're going to want to leverage that in raising our awareness in the community and the education piece of it as well. So that's on here as a goal for us to really use this project as a means of that outreach too. So we're very excited about that. Because of all of that, not only is it good from an environment standpoint, but it's also earned us some things here. So we'll get into the project financials. If you can go to the next slide, Joel. We start looking at the cost estimate for this. One of the very important things is we're seeking funding for this through the state of Michigan's sewer revolving fund, they call it. It's a very low interest rate. The state actually buys the bonds. So they're a guaranteed buyer, and they're giving us a rate of 2% per year. But on top of that, because of the attributes of this project, going to a Class A biosolid as opposed to Class B biosolid, going to the greenhouse gas reduction techniques associated with the capturing of the methane and using it for heat and power. We've earned a rating for this. We've actually earned a reduction in our obligation. It's called a Green Project Reserve. And so they are actually awarding, several other entities in Michigan applied for this as well. There was a pot of money available. We've earned $4.6 million of principal forgiveness. So we're going to be bonding $30 million of work here, and we'll talk about how this breaks out into the various financial analysis. But our repayment obligation essentially will only be $25.4 million of that. So our bonding will be $4.6 million less than that because the state will forgive that as part of that Green Project Reserve. So as Joel talked about up front, the last couple of years we looked at a lot of different options. And some of those that really were the most, I would call it, viable if there was an alternative, it was really the additional storage was maybe the most viable. And what additional storage would give you is it give you that flexibility on being able to time when you go to those fields because they otherwise wouldn't be available. The no action alternative that you see on the screen here really is not an alternative we see. The reason is, as Joel talked about, this difficulty of getting on farm fields and the timing associated with that, but also landfills. It's getting more and more difficult to go to landfills because landfills are receiving less dry waste. Recycling has been a great thing, but recycling has also reduced the amount of dry waste going to landfills, and our waste is still considered a wet waste. And so the purposes of actually trying to build the berms and to structurally set up a landfill when there's that much wet waste in it is problematic, and there can be structural integrity issues with a landfill when you have too much of the wet waste. So they're really pushing back on that. So we really think this no action alternative really isn't an alternative. But even when you put that up against the other options that are there, the anaerobic digester with the sewer revolving fund shows that really over a series of possible escalation costs in disposal, that it's the lowest cost option over the long run, which is something that we wanted to continue to go back and test as we went through this. We had budgeted $32 million for this project. So you see as part of this recommendation we're going to get to, it does involve a transfer from contingency. But when you look at the life cycle and you look at the investments that we're making in the combined heat and power, which were not part of our first go around on some of the initial assessment of what we were going to do, we think it is the best life cycle alternative. If you go to the some of the next slide, Joel, So this kind of shows you from a cash flow perspective how that shakes out. And what really becomes evident here is that when the bonds are paid off after 20 years, is a 20-year life on these bonds. There you see the servicing of that debt go away, and you see how there's a strong departure against either the additional storage or no action to both cases where we looked at an anaerobic digester with and without combined heat and power. You can see that there's a huge change there. And the life of these digesters are a lot longer than 30 years. So we're going to experience, after the debt is paid off, very significant continual savings year over year. Beyond that, because we're reducing the volume down, our risk factor is significantly less. And this evaluation is done considering the same disposal cost for a Class A biosolid generated out of the anaerobic digester that we're paying for the current Class B biosolid. We know that there should be advantages to the Class A biosolid that will result in a lower cost. But to make sure that this evaluation was conservative in nature, we kept the same disposal cost and just recognized the lower amount of volume that we were disposing of. So that's a pretty significant change that's there.
Yeah, I guess going kind of along with that, when you see those 3 NPVs, and we'll go through the charts here, we also tried to be conservative looking at the escalation of that disposal cost over time. For reference, over the last, we talked about how much we've increased in recent years, so our average has been about 7% a year over this last 10 years. Actual. Those costs I mentioned were higher than that, but we were able to mitigate some of that cost increase by shifting between the 2 disposal methods and doing some improvements to our processes to take away some of that increase. We're getting limited on how many of those things we can do, but the actual increase we've experienced has been about 7% a year on average. So what you'll see here on these charts is 3%, 5%, and 7%. So we kind of said, what happens if things get a little more normal versus what we've seen this last 10 years of 7%? We wanted to see what's it look like at 5, what's it look like at 3.
And so this chart here is the 3%, but if you want to advance, Joel, to the 5%, you can see it even separates further on that. And then finally at the 7%, it's a really big spread at that point. The first year you do see a little extra cash going in here, and that's because we're going to bond $30 million. The remainder of that $33.7 million, $3.7 million additional, is going to come out of the equipment replacement fund. It's a reserve pool of money that all the participants in the wastewater plant, and reminder for those at home and for council, that it's not just the city of Holland that uses our water reclamation facility. It's also the townships of Park, Holland, Fillmore, and Lake Town that also bring flows into that as well. So there's a pool of money there for equipment replacement, and there's a pretty healthy reserve that's in place. So we're going to use some of that to pay for the project as well.
Yeah, along with that, it's probably a good reminder too that the bond portion is that's not all Holland's obligation. Actually, bond obligations relative to the reclamation facility are split between the southern service area, which is BPW's retail area, and the northern service area, which is Holland Township's service area.
And that's about a 50-50 split in terms of that obligation. So if you go on to the next slide, I think the other thing that we wanted to point out to people at home a little bit was to describe the visuals. And obviously this is not a small object. It is egg-shaped. It will be the kind of thing like Holland Energy Park. You build it, it's going to stand out. If it's going to stand out, you want to embrace it and educate about it and really sort of leverage that. This is probably the biggest view that you're going to have in terms of, and you'll see on the other images, is much more subdued. This is looking north along Central Avenue, so you're looking right into the site. The digester will sit on kind of the eastern edge of the site. That's where it's planned to be. It's where the design is set up. It is important to know that as part of its envision process too, there was a lot of outreach. Joel spent time talking, and actually the project team, I should say, spent time talking with Outdoor Discovery Center about educational opportunities and the window on the waterfront. Spent time talking to the Downtown Development Authority as well and talking about what was going on there. Another huge advantage of this that we haven't talked about is it does reduce odor potential by building the kind of egg that we have, the kind of digester that we have in the process versus a membrane tank. But beyond that, when we're breaking down those solids in the digester, Everything that's afterward in terms of the dewatering and the processing of those solids has been after all of that volatiles have been broken down, so the odor potential in the entire plant is reduced significantly. And so that's a huge advantage, you know, to the area and development and things like that. Aesthetically, there's a fairly large object there. Also aesthetically, there's a much reduced potential for odor on that site, and that's a real positive thing. So if we go to the next slide.
I'll make one side note on
Yeah.
this just from an aesthetic standpoint. You'll see the egg, and right next to it, you see like a big tower. Originally, it was planned to have a separate the stairs and a separate tower next to it. Those stairs are actually wrapping around the egg, so that's not going to be in the view here.
We also took a look from across the bridge. So here it's a little bit tougher to see, but if you look on the far left-hand side, you can kind of see it peeking out from the trees there a little bit. That's from the north side looking across. Also, we took a shot from the River Hills Drive on the north side, and there again, you can kind of see about 4/5 the way over on the left there in the treescape that's there. And then on the next slide is more from Windmill Island. A lot tougher to see. It's way in the distance there, and it's among the trees, but I don't even know if I can see it real well at this point. So that's to give people an understanding of the aesthetic impacts from this project as well. So I think the next slide kind of captures project timeline here. This is the last piece of the process. We have a recommendation for the construction tonight is really what's in front of you. With successful work here and closing of our loan with the state, which is intended to be at the end of September. We're planning on getting started in October with construction. And it's a process that's going to last just about 3 years. So it's a big project. And we do plan on applying the final application for our Envision rating, you know, coming up here in 2021. So the recommendation that's in front of you tonight is we have a recommendation. We put this out to bid. We had 5, I think, responders to that, Joel.
Correct.
There was a base bid, and there were some options that we requested. Some of the options included the combined heat and power, and some of the things, there was some additional redundancy in some areas. So the contract that we're asking for approval tonight is $29,291,900. Again, contingent, so this is a tentative award, contingent on successful sewer revolving fund financing. And again, this would also have a contract contingency of $1.4 million, which is just a little under 5% of the contract value. But that all, combined with the engineering costs and everything, gets us to that project cost of $33.7 million, and does require a $1.7 million transfer from contingency to supplement the capital budget of $32 million that we had. And so that's also a request for you tonight.
Great, thank you. Thanks both Dave and Joel. Questions from council? Yeah, Mike.
You had mentioned 2 byproducts, the the fertilizer, and the gas. You also mentioned something about the ammonia. Is there a way to extract and capture that, or is that not a viable product?
It's really bound up in the liquids. There's not a real great way to extract it. So really what you're doing is treating it so that you release it as atmospheric nitrogen.
Okay.
Yeah, Scott.
You mentioned the bonds. My understanding or what you were saying is the bonds are going to be done through the state.
Scott, can you move up to your mic a little bit? It's difficult to hear you. Us old
Sorry.
guys are having trouble.
The bonds itself, you said that are issued by the state, or they're going to
buy the bonds. So we had a couple of options to sell the bonds. You could do what's a general obligation bond. We've done that both through the city in the past, but also through the county, because there's multiple jurisdictions using this plant. But in this particular case, instead of having to go through the county and have an administrative fee there, we just decided to offer this as a revenue bond, which means that we had to pledge that there'd be rates, both through our contract with that northern service area and our retail rates, to sufficiently pay back the bonds. But under this program, instead of the bonds being sold to any private investor that wants to buy the bonds, the state of Michigan is buying them for a guaranteed rate of 2% for the 20-year bond. So, and also because we're in that program, we're able to get this green project reserve amount of the $4.6 million principal forgiveness.
You also mentioned carbon reduction. Has there been an effort to calculate that carbon reduction in total?
It has, yes. I don't have the number right in front of me. I don't know if you do, Joel, but it's something we could follow up with you. It was something where we presented that back to the BPW board when we were going through the design process and looked at the incremental cost, and there was a small incremental cost to that, but when we looked at the social value of that reduction, the board was on board with it too, to go ahead and make the greenhouse gas reduction, the combined heat and power.
I was going to say, that is something we can follow up on. We need to redo those calculations. Actually, when we did them, they showed a pretty large reduction, and it's actually much larger now. With this latest change in the landfill contract, we were going, those trucks hauling to the landfill were going to Drenth.
True.
Any trucks going to the landfill now are going to either Hastings or Elkhart, Indiana. So the carbon reduction on that transportation is substantially higher now.
Right. I don't think people think about calculating those
Correct.
numbers in, and I appreciate you doing that. There's a lot of people on this board even that are interested in that carbon reduction. So, and then the other thing is a shell. I think when we were at our last discussion, our retreat, we had talked about this briefly about moving forward with this project. I mentioned a shell, a potential shell around this facility. Was that ever determined if there could be a cost?
Yeah, so there's two different types of structural coatings for this type of digester. One is insulated with a hard kind of like a shell would be, around that, but it's essentially just an exterior to the insulation that's coated. And the other is more of a fabric that wraps it. They're actually represented here. The picture on this page to the lower right, I think, is Appleton.
That's Appleton.
Appleton, Wisconsin. That's a fabric wrap on there. The picture immediately to the left of that actually is Granville, I believe, just up the road from us. Am I correct on that, Joel?
Correct.
Yeah. So that one you can see is not the fabric. They don't look much different between the two. And they can be painted. The fabric is more of a color you pick for the fabric, but the painting, one of the reasons we opted not to do the fabric is you could probably paint the tank, paint the digester 15 times for the relative cost of the increased of the fabric. And so we just didn't see with our weather patterns here and wear and tear that, that was a good economic decision for us. But there still is a shell that's on there. It's a hard surface yet, and it's something that can be painted. So.
Okay. And then the first picture you showed relative to the plant off of what street?
3rd Street, you have to go back up a couple slides there.
What is the setback there with regard to the specs? Did you have a setback from the roadway there? And is there room for a tree canopy by chance?
Well, the road, what's between the digester and the road, there's a lot more equipment there. So it looks closer to 3rd Street than it is. It's set back in the plant quite a bit. Your tree canopy really exists because there's a drain on the other side to window on the waterfront. There's actually a drain that goes through there. And actually there's a relocation, I think as part of this project, there's relocating a storm sewer as well that's going to be part of that. Then throughout there, though, there is some tree canopy along that side of that drain.
Okay. And just one more question. You mentioned that we're able to make this a Class A biosolid.
Right.
And it can be applied in many different applications, right? So is there, a market for that? I think we had talked about that earlier. There's a market, and we're talking about that as a potential revenue source as well. But 2 is we own about 250 acres to the south. If it doesn't have an odor, can it be applied to property we already own as a city?
It will be able to be applied as a fertilizer, really, and there's not a restriction as far as that goes when it's a Class A biosolid. Now, I tell you that our next step, even as this is being built, our next action plan for our staff is to do an evaluation of, some options for the Class A biosolid. There's a couple of things that we're looking at. One, there's a consortium of other area, like talked about Granville is having another digester. City of Grand Rapids is also building a digester. that there's an opportunity maybe for some regional collaboration on the byproduct of the digester going to a centralized facility for drying and then processing. So there's a county-wide activity going on that right now that we're participating in. Another thing that we'd like to test is the possibility, we have recently essentially let the city use 20 acres that the BPW owns between the 48th Street peaking station and the old Lifesavers building on 48th Street for the composting area. So the possibility of mixing in some of the Class A biosolid into the composting and see if there's some product that maybe could be developed there. So there's a number of things that we're looking at in terms of fate to try to reduce what we have as a conservative estimate, saying let's just assume that it all goes to the fate that the Class B biosolid does now at the same price that the Class B biosolid. It still is economically available. We think that we can only improve that cost structure going forward.
Great. Thanks, Scott. Any other questions, comments? Yes, Lynn.
Is there a plan in case the cost of the building goes higher than what you're anticipating?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got, a lot of engineering that's been done, so I don't think there's gonna be a lot of surprises at this point. The contingency we have on the contract, the extra 1.4 million is already built into the project cost. So I think it covers a lot of what our expectation would be. There is some additional money in the equipment replacement fund if we needed to do that. There's also an ability to reapply for additional funding through the sewer revolving fund if we got into this and there was a surprise and something happened where, again, this is a 2.5, 3-year construction period. We needed to try to seek some more funding from the state. We could probably do that under another application, taking part of that process and then sourcing that, funding for that potentially. But I really think, and I know, Joel, I'll let you comment on it, I think we've done a lot of work to try to nail this thing down to a point where hopefully any surprises are out of it.
I would agree with that. I think we're pretty comfortable with the budget as is, and the contingency that we're seeking here. I think we're pretty comfortable that we'll be within that.
I know.
Yeah, go ahead, Nikki.
The painting of it, since there's no fabric covering, and how often would that have to be painted?
Likely every 10 to 15 years.
And does it flake off? How do you, or does it just wear so that you notice that you need?
It's just going to be wear over time, very just similar to a water tank. It's going to be very similar to that.
Yeah. Our elevated water tanks, for example, if you think about the one out at 48th Street again, across from Hayworth, next to our peaking facility there, that has to be painted periodically as well, and it would be sort of the same situation. We'd see some deterioration of it, and they would come out and prep the surface and then reapply, coating to that.
So this is kind of a gray color, and you're when you talk about it, I get the idea that you want it to not be so visible, but it really is kind of cool. It's an egg sitting,
right.
Kind
Sure.
of. It's there.
Yes, it
and
is.
I wonder if you might not want to paint it, maybe not gray, maybe something else.
Yeah, I don't know that the final, we haven't really made a final decision on the color yet at this point, but that's something we can certainly talk about and see if there's an opportunity there. I know a lot of people have had great suggestions. I've thought about Keith Van Beek's portrait on the side of it, but
Vote for me.
If there was one appropriate space for my picture, it'd be on a digest.
Well,
Yeah, we've had that conversation.
I figured Scott would say that, so I wanted to put it to the punch.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments from council? I just had one follow-up for you, Dave. The fabric that you were talking about with Scott, that's purely aesthetic. There's no functional aspect to that at all?
Right.
Okay.
There's really not any additional protection or anything like that. And I don't know if you want to make any additional comments on that, Joel, but I think it's...
Yeah, I can't say there's no additional protection, but there's no concerns about the insulation. And Granville's had theirs for 10 plus years, and we haven't heard of any problems from them. That insulation is designed to take, it's going to run against hail and some other things. Obviously, the fabric might provide a little more protection, but I don't think there's any concerns about
But that's not really the purpose of it.
No,
the purpose
it's really
is
aesthetic.
aesthetic. Okay, great. I would entertain a motion from council to tentatively award the anaerobic digester construction contract.
So moved.
Moved by Hoekstra. Is there support? Support by Trethewey. Any discussion? Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Trethewey,
Yes.
Aaronshorst,
Yes.
Corbin, Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Peters, Garcia,
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Wonderful, thank you. Next item, 12E 1.1, Transportation Services. Approve contract modification to contract with Georgetown Construction and revise budget for right-of-way improvements to Sandy's Subdivision. Mr. Van Beek?
Yeah, I'm gonna just briefly say a few thank yous. Thank you to Brian White and his team, but quite frankly, on this one, I know Brian really took point on much of this. Mark Vanderplug certainly and his team, Mark Cornelis, I saw at a couple public meetings with the sidewalk component of this, but also thank you to Nikki. Nikki, there was a lot of public meetings and no shortage of back and forth and conversations, and I don't think we made everyone happy here, but there was a lot of work that went into it. So Brian's gonna come up, I don't know if Mark's gonna add a few things, but primarily Brian's gonna come up, probably familiarize yourself with this project. It was one that was before you at one point, and then talk about how we'd definitely recommend moving forward on this. So again, thanks, Brian.
Okay, thanks, Keith, and good evening, Mayor Box and council members. Would like to just echo what Keith mentioned with Nikki. Seen a lot of Nikki over the last few days and evenings, and really appreciate her support there, so thanks for that. Just to elaborate a little bit, and I'll try not to get into the weeds too much here, but basically back in the fall of 2019, yeah, thank you for the slide cue. Back in the fall of 2019, we brought a sidewalk improvement project to council for the neighborhood. A portion of that was approved back then with some direction about re-engaging the neighborhood. There was some comments that were really ranged from, well, let's go ahead and redo, the whole road full on curb and gutter everywhere, to let's just hold off on everything and just resurface the road. So a lot of back and forth since then to try and land on an optimal way forward. But basically, we followed up with some engagement of the neighborhood. We held a public meeting in January, and then we had one queued up for March when everything with COVID-19 hit. So that got delayed, and we really felt obligated to have a third public meeting with the neighborhood because things were still, somewhat in the air with what we wanted to do and the extent of the work that we wanted to do. So we went ahead and just held a final public meeting last week. And I can echo what Keith said, that not everyone, I think, is 100% wonderful, happy that this with the final product here. But I do think that we certainly tried to be flexible, and I think in the end we've got a project that's at least palatable with everyone. And so that's certainly the desire going forward, that we try and do what we can to be flexible. And with that, I guess I just wanted to touch upon the highlights, if you will, for what all is included in the project. And again, I'll be brief here. And I think the next slide, yes, there's some hatching and shading on this slide that basically follows with some of the text within the body of the report. But basically, sidewalk, curb and gutter, storm sewer, driveway approach infill along 30th Street between the Wolverine gas pipeline, which is that dashed north-south line, and Ottawa Avenue. Then we are proposing sidewalk on both sides of 30th Street between the Wolverine gas line and Plasman Avenue. And then we're talking about sidewalk on the west side of Ottawa Avenue between 32nd Street and 29th Street. Again, the picture here kind of highlights in different hatching where that goes. The other thing that I wanted to share is we were able to switch around some resurfacing. And again, this was when we were working on budgets this year, back a few months ago. And so what we had planned to do was basically at the end of this, come in with the resurfacing, and that'll be the last step, basically, that we'll go ahead and resurface all the streets. That is being done through a prior approved project, so our 2020 resurfacing project included those funds for that work. So another thing I think it's worth mentioning, again, this is primarily an infill project. It's kind of a hodgepodge of curb and gutter, sidewalk here, there. So we're not proposing to put forth any assessments. And furthermore, on the sidewalk side of things, we are proposing to use CDBG funding, as you see with the project budget, the proposed budget, that a portion of the amount would come from the CDBG funds. The other portion coming from the street funds. Again, we had 220,000 programmed in on our streets capital. We're at 225 to make it work, so we're awful close, but couldn't quite make that. So at any rate, that's basically what I had wanted to share with you tonight, along with the recommendation. Certainly happy to answer any questions or field any comments.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Any questions? Mike?
You know, there's concern with the business owner on the northwest corner of 30th and Ottawa. You were able to work things out with him?
Yeah, again, I would say, I wouldn't necessarily characterize it as 100% there. You know, I met with him personally. He definitely expressed his concerns. I don't think he's in favor of what all we're doing there. I do think, though, that things have improved in terms of the operation there. And I think the neighborhood, he was actually at the last neighborhood meeting, and we'd actually acknowledged that things have improved. So my hope, my thought is that things will continue to improve and may even be a little bit better with the planned improvements. But I would definitely be mischaracterizing to say that he's, 100% on board with this. In fact, I would say that there's probably still a little bit more work we could do with him, just to try and work with him on it.
Yeah, Keith.
But I would like to add there, we're kind of talking about a perspective of trying to ameliorate some concerns and trying to make things workable. Remember, we started all of this with a perspective of there were some infrastructure improvements that, quite frankly, needed to be made from an aesthetic standpoint, but also do some separation of things that were happening out there and parking, and most importantly, and why we really feel solid about the CDBG use of funds here, is you may recall when we did this last time, we had pictures of a lot of kids in the area in the apartment complex that's on 30th and walking situations. And so, certainly we do things quite often at the city that don't make everybody happy. But we do feel that, and why we kept pushing on this one is because we think that this is the right thing to do for everyone in that neighborhood, and it brings a sense of additional safety that, quite frankly, I think was lacking a little bit.
Yeah, it's a good point that you bring up, and I apologize for not including some of those slides. I included them in the public meeting, but, and I think Mark was the photographer there, but there's clearly kids going back and forth right in front of the auto folks. And to have the cars 2 and 3 deep and things like that, it just doesn't make for a really good situation, particularly in wintertime. The kids are out in the street. Like to keep them on the sidewalk, much safer situation, so.
I agree, and just with the aesthetics of the neighborhood, as you say, it was a hodgepodge. And then with, as one of the neighbors said, it's really 2 different neighborhoods. You have the area closer, the hodgepodge area closer to Ottawa, and with some rentals. And then as you go further west, it's there are no sidewalks, but the lawns are tidier. And so it's a little bit at risk, and I think this will help a lot. Getting it unified, and then getting the business owner set up, and it should help. And as you say, not everybody was on board, but I think you did. This was amazing. No, Brian really was. That this you're the city, and so you say let's get this done. We need to get this done. but then we'll move a sidewalk a little bit this way, or we'll move this around your tree, and you had the arborist there. That makes a huge difference with people and their attitudes, because we value our neighborhoods, and I think they felt that. So we'll.
Great, thank you. Any other questions, comments? I will entertain a motion to approve contract modification to contract with Georgetown Construction and revised budget for the right-of-way improvements to Sandy's subdivision. Do we have a motion?
So move.
Moved by Aaronsource. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Trethewey. Any discussion? Kathy, could you please call the roll?
Aaronsource?
Yes.
Corbin? Hoekstra?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Peters? Garcia? Trethewey?
Yes.
Mayor Box?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And we are now moving on to item 12E 6.7, fiscal year 2021 strategic plan and business plan. This was moved off of the consent agenda and onto the regular agenda. Mr. Van Beek?
We can certainly do that, but I'm looking at Kathy. Is gifts come up first? Gifts first.
Oh, I apologize. I
all right.
put that
You're
in the
eager.
wrong spot. Let's do the gifts first then. Thank you. Thanks for that correction.
The city manager's office is pleased to report the following gifts. City clerk's office, personal protection equipment, League of Women Voters, $150. Department of Public Safety Services, General Donation Fund, East Holland Veterinary Clinic, $100. It is recommended that these donations be accepted with appreciation, credited to the appropriate account, and an expression of gratitude be forwarded to said donors.
Motion to accept with appreciation.
Moved by Trethewey. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Aaronsource. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now, I believe that we're on to item 12E 6.7, fiscal year 2021 strategic plan and business plan approval.
So I think everyone knows what this is about. If it's okay, I'm just gonna turn it over. I think maybe Lynn has a question or a comment, or?
I don't have a question. I just didn't think we got a chance to really talk about it last time. There was a couple things I just wanted to say.
Okay.
So, it was really helpful to take a look at it and to be reminded what we talked about back in January. So it's a great document, and I appreciate the work that you did putting it together. And certainly appreciate the challenge of staying focused on those goals and objectives in the midst of a community-wide crisis. So I just think the staff, it speaks really highly to you, your staff, the dedication of you all to not only focus on keeping people safe, but also to remember that there's still work that needs to be done, and you're doing it every day. So, and I'm happy with the way that you and your team identified our priorities and focused on them and created some action steps. So I didn't get a chance to say that last time, so I wanted to just put that on the record.
Right. You can pull stuff off the consent agenda anytime. No, it's really, thank you, seriously, thank you. And really the reflection goes back to the team. But I think it points to why one of the things that I really encouraged us to do together when I came on board is to do the strategic plan, but particularly the business plan. Because it does, when other things hit the fan, it does have that constant reminder that there's other things going on, and it's kind of like, oh yeah, and quite frankly, there's an element of, there's a quarterly report coming up that we owe back to you, and it's kind of like, there's a timeline in a certain area, or we haven't talked about this in a while. So hopefully it will continue to serve its purpose and move us all forward, so thank you.
Any other comments? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to approve the business plan and strategic plan.
So moved.
Moved by Raymond. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Garcia. Any discussion? Kathy, would you please call the roll on this one?
Corbin? Yes. Hoekstra?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Peters? Yes. Garcia?
Yes.
Trethewey?
Yes.
Aaronsource?
Yes.
Mayor Box?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Now, item number 13, communications from the city manager.
Hey, it's before 8:30, so I get to take a few minutes, but I'm gonna go quick. One, we already talked about, and I just wanna highlight, you may, if you're really good at memorizing the budget, you may remember, but we actually had 4 vehicles that we were looking to purchase, and tonight we just did 3 of those. The reason that we're holding off, and it was kind of mentioned in the write-up, is that we actively had an electric vehicle out at our transportation department last week, a Tesla, and we're evaluating that to be used in our detective bureau, actually. It's one of the places that we think that is a higher use vehicle, and yet there is the technology, or basically there's the vehicle out there that meets our operational needs. For our patrol vehicles, there's not an option yet. For our heavier duty vehicles, there's really not an option yet. Even for our inspection vehicles, because they go on work sites and all those types of things, we just don't think there's a very good option, which is why we went to the hybrid. But interestingly, in the detective bureau, it's one where we don't have to put a ton of equipment in there, so we're evaluating it. Believe it or not, it's probably not hard to believe, a lot of our detectives were pretty interested in taking a test drive.
Seriously.
And as opposed to the Volt that we had historically, that we continue to have out here, that I don't think would have been a good option there. We do think that this is. So again, that's probably gonna come forward. You're probably gonna see that relatively soon. We're very much viewing that as a pilot. We're gonna test a little bit. We think it's the smart way to go. Figure out, have transportation figure out, like, okay, what does maintenance look like, and what do we have to learn, and getting, charging set up, and potentially in a private home with a detective, but also over at DPS. So we're excited about that. So I just want to highlight that because we have a lot of excited people around here about that. But also, if you were wondering, that's why we're doing 3 instead of the 4 vehicles now. Big thank you also to Kathy Grimm, her team. Brenda especially, I know, puts in a ton of work as our election specialist on that. And I think there may be 2 people up here that put in an extra long day of work yesterday also. Really did a fantastic job. I am going to let you know, it's still kind of a work in progress, or not totally known, but I will let you know that we had given you an update that there was an error made, and just to not to cast anything, but just to make sure that everyone understands, in case you get questions. Unfortunately, just an error, it happens. At the Allegan County Clerk, there were 2 county-wide Allegan ballot proposals that erroneously did not get programmed, and that happens at the counties. Same thing would happen on the Ottawa side. That didn't get on the ballots for those Holland residents that live in Allegan County. So by time that it was caught, it was too late to make that change for Election Day yesterday. So and quite frankly, the city, Kathy and our team, was involved in the discussions, but wasn't involved in figuring out kind of even before Election Day, like, okay, what are we gonna do? And then what are the implications potentially that could happen? That's really between the State Bureau of Elections and then Allegan County. They kind of had okay, this is what's gonna happen if scenario. It appears that this is what's gonna happen if scenario is probably gonna be taken up. And what do I mean by that? There is the mathematical possibility that the number of voters that voted, and it's just the number of voters that voted is our understanding.
Yes.
And again, that's not our decision, but that's under an understanding from the State Bureau of Elections. That if they all voted in a certain way, that could have altered the outcome of the county-wide election in Allegan. yesterday on both of those issues. So we've been informed, although not officially, that we believe that someone is going to actually file to investigate and find out what could happen to do that. So I just wanted to make sure that, because you might get questions about that, and I just wanted to make sure kind of you knew the foundational elements there, which is, yes, errors happen. It wasn't certainly an error that Kathy or her team made. We get to be involved with dealing with it, but that's okay. And we're still waiting to hear, but more than likely what's going to happen is that there will be kind of an additional, it's not an additional election, but maybe an additional process where all of the Holland voters in Allegan County, only in Allegan County, that did vote yesterday, they're the only ones that would be able to potentially have a chance to vote then just on those two items. Okay? In a way, I hesitated in even giving you this much information because, one, we don't know for sure that that request is going to be made to actually initiate that process. And two, there's a lot of detail in there in which Kathy and her team aren't part of making those decisions, but we get to be part of implementing those decisions. So I felt it better just to let you know that's just one more thing that we're dealing with today. And when I say we, the reality is it's really Kathy and her fantastic team. So,
Could I comment to that?
yes, thanks, Scott.
So Clerk Janetsky, also, when I confronted him on that issue, he said there would be no cost to the city for anything that was related to this. And I was assured of that.
We would appreciate that. And then the National Night Out activities, which is something that we always really look forward to doing, not only in community and neighborhood services, but other departments, and then very obviously our Department of Public Safety. We had kind of already delayed and held that, and nationally that organization has really decided / recommended to not have events this year. So even though we were holding that date, I know police and community relations looked at that yesterday and made the decision to not proceed with that event this year, so we're not going to do that. And then finally, I'm going to ask Matt Van Dyken to play that. Remember, we're trying to get back to playing that video of the week for all of you. And this is kind of a fun one, and then he might say a few things too.
Yeah, so some fun stuff, right, at the end of the meeting.
Music.
Some beautiful flowers. Windmill Island Gardens, we celebrated Peak Week, so that's the highest level of bloom that's out there at the island during the summertime. We had about 800 people, just under 800 people show up on Saturday, paying customers. In addition to those customers that were able to get into the island for free. As you can see, this is done by one of our CATV interns. They did a great job of showing what's beautiful out at the island. We celebrated Peak Week, but it's still going to be beautiful for quite a while. So if you haven't had the chance to get out there, please do. I was able to walk the island actually earlier this week with Matt and Ott, looking at some possible improvements to increase some access to other places of the island than just the perimeter and the mill and the gardens, and there are really some hidden gems out there. You wouldn't think it on the island, but there are some beautiful spots that are beautifully peaceful, and we're working hard to bring some things back to you that increase access to them. So with that, beautiful Windmill Island Gardens, if you haven't been out there, you all get in free, so go take advantage of it, right? Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm done.
Oh, you're all set too? All right, great.
Thank
Thank you, Keith. Any questions for Keith and/or Matt? Excellent. Next item on the agenda, mayoral appointments, reappointments, and resignations to city boards and commissions. And we do have a number of them this evening. I'd ask that you please accept the appointments of Rebecca Skipper to the Human Relations Commission for her first full term, Jessica Kreger to the Human Relations Commission for a partial term to replace Commissioner Virginia Greenlee, who resigned effective July 1, 2020. The appointment of Catherine Sullivan to the Public Art Advisory Committee for her first full term. We'd ask that you please accept the resignation of Virginia Greenlee from the Human Relations Commission effective July 1, 2020. And the following individuals have agreed to serve on the Holland Community Energy Plan Strategic Development Team. Council members Nikki Ernsthorst and Scott Corbin, thank you for that. Holland Board of Public Works Board of Directors Tim Hemingway and PJ Thompson. I'm currently working with President Scogan at Hope College in regard to a Hope College representative that hopefully will be named fairly soon. And we'll get back to you, Council, obviously, on that. And then community representatives Travis Williams, Brian Pajow, and Boyd Feltman. We'd also please ask that you accept the appointments of Raul Garcia and Dave Hoekstra to the Holland Energy Fund for a full term. Typically, these appointments are fairly routine, but I believe that the appointments to the strategic development team are kind of important to highlight, because this was one of the primary goals of this council at our retreat this year, or at Advance, excuse me. Many in the public may not have a clear idea of what the community energy plan is, its importance to the community, or why the council has listed it as a top priority for this year. And I think it's important for the people of Holland to understand that importance. 10 years ago, Holland embarked on a 40-year journey to our energy future. The idea of the community energy plan was ambitious. How do we find and implement meaningful, measurable, achievable, and sustainable ways to make Holland a world-class energy efficient city? Holland's community energy plan seeks to balance the goals of protecting the environment while being competitive in our energy supply and attractive to business development by proposing and implementing multiple residential, commercial, industrial, and transportation initiatives. The plan measures success on how much greenhouse gas is emitted per person in Holland, and that was brought up this evening, and Scott, thanks for pointing that out. I appreciate that. We started the journey at 24 metric tons per person per year. Without a comprehensive community energy plan, that number was expected to grow to 37 metric tons by 2050. The current plan seeks to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to 10 by 2050. By 2018, even with an increase in industrial and commercial energy demand due to economic growth in our community, Holland reduced our greenhouse gas emissions to 19 metric tons per person, getting us just over 1/3 of the way toward our initial goal. But frankly, there's still work that needs to be done. From the beginning, this council recognized that the survival of this long-term plan would require periodic review and reevaluation. The community energy plan was first reviewed 3 years ago by a strategic development team appointed by the mayor. It evaluated the success of the then current initiatives, it reviewed relevant new and emerging data, and made recommendations to City Council on strategic priorities to be implemented over the following 3 to 5 years. Those interim strategies were adopted by Council and were targeted to be achieved by 2021. Many of the initial proposals have become part of the basic structure of our community and part of really Holland's way of life. Holland's home energy retrofit program and on-bill financing programs, electric vehicle incentives, electric vehicle purchases, as we heard tonight, Holland's Board of Public Works energy waste reduction program, and electricity generation portfolio shift from coal to efficient natural gas and renewable energy have already resulted in reductions to Holland's carbon footprint. But much of that gain was achieved through the construction of our more energy efficient gas-fired power plant. There's still work that needs to be done. In every sense of the word, the environment has continued to change. There are new challenges and new opportunities, and it's time again to ask the questions: are we still headed in the right direction? Are we on the right road? And are we moving at the right speed? As mayor, I've appointed this team of community, corporate, environmental, governmental, utility, and academic leaders to review what we've done so far, take an honest look at what's worked, at what hasn't, and how we can do better. There's a synergy with this group. I'm proud of this group that's agreed to do this. They've got strong minds and strong voices. They must be aggressive in their efforts. They must leave no stone unturned. Their work will play a key role of presenting options to this council, so then we can determine not just what we can do, but what we should do and how we'll pay for it. I'm challenging the members of the strategic development team to show Holland better ways of doing things. I want them to teach us how to save energy, save money, and preserve the beautiful world that we've been given. I want them to motivate us, give us incentives to do better. By converting our power plant, the city brought us a long way toward our initial goal, but it's going to be up to the people of Holland to step up and ensure that even as we grow, we remain the greenest city in the state of Michigan and beyond. Dave's presentation tonight was a good example of trying to be a leader, trying to do the best. We're trying to be innovative, trying to be cutting edge in what we do. Tim Hemingway, the chair of the BPW board, I believe epitomizes the spirit of the people of Holland when he says, if we're going to choose to do something, let's choose to be the best. And tonight's presentation, I think, was a good example of that. So let's choose to be the best. It's not only the right thing to do for the planet, it's fiscally smart, it attracts people and business and development, and it creates jobs, and as we heard tonight, it saves money. Our future lies with an aggressive, achievable community energy plan that protects the beauty of our home and continues to provide our residents, our businesses, and our industry with clean, affordable, reliable energy. Let's put this team in place. Let's let them do their work so then we can do our work. 10 years ago, Council made a commitment to Holland's energy future, and our commitment to that future must continue today. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve the listed appointments, reappointments, and resignations to city boards and commissions.
So moved.
Moved by Chathui. Is there support?
Support.
Is that you, Dave? Support by Hoekstra. Discussion. Yeah, Lynn.
Yeah, thank you. That was real. I appreciate you that introduction to the strategic development team. I looked at the folks that you've appointed, and they have a wealth of experience and knowledge, and I think they'll be really valuable. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the work they're doing. I am quite concerned that Nikki is the only female on the committee, and there are no people of color. And I think that especially in this time, we need to be thinking more seriously and more deliberately about who we choose and who we ask and what kind of contribution people can make even beyond the area of academics and business. And so I hope that as you all move forward and you create and you're beginning to evaluate the community energy plan, and I hope it'll also be a more broad evaluation of not just the plan, but what else can, and I think you touched on that, Mayor, but to figure out ways that you can include the community in the process itself, as opposed to creating a process and a plan and asking them to speak into or having an opinion about it once it's already done. So I think that the people in the community can tell us what they what they need. One of the folks that's been interested in this and been talking to us a lot about this said we should be driven by what the people tell us they need. And so I think it would be important to gather that information as you're moving forward and making sure that the community at large is representative there in the group as well.
One point of clarification too, but I'm sure you know this, but the public may not. All of the meetings of the strategic development team are open meetings, and so there will be opportunity at every single meeting for public comment and public participation. But I think what I'm hearing you say too is you're asking that the members of the team to actively engage members of the public in this process as well.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks.
Great. Other questions or comments? Great.
I'm glad it's finally getting off the ground. So
Wonderful.
Thank you for the initial work.
Yep. Great. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Raymond,
Yes.
Peters, Garcia,
Yes.
Trethewey,
Yes.
Arnshorst,
Yes.
Corbin, Hoekstra,
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Next item, appointments, motions, and communications from council members. Mr. Hoekstra with the bell.
Seriously.
Thank you, Your Honor. Two things. First of all, thank you, Keith, for bringing up the reality of the election yesterday and the fine work that the clerks group has done. I want to reiterate that once again. I was involved with that. I believe you were as well. Every time these elections come around, and I have to be honest, I look upon it with a little bit of a dread because 15-hour days or whatever take a toll on an old guy like me, but I am constantly amazed at the intricacy of the process. I mean, you go in and you cast your vote, you think that's pretty simple, but all of the things that go on, consequently checking the checks and balances, the number of steps that have to be gone through to ensure that everyone's vote is properly tabulated and recorded, but also that it's done without error. Frankly, I don't see how voter fraud could occur in the way that we do things. You'd have to be I don't know what, but anyway, there's a lot of people that are involved in this, and Kathy and her group are extremely dedicated. So kudos again to you and your group. That was amazing.
We're here.
The other thing I want to speak to is rather germane, actually, as we've just appointed and approved the strategic development team to look at the community energy plan. We have, as a group, over some amount of time, talked about that. We've prioritized it as something that we want to look at and have attention drawn to. We've also talked about the fact that we may not, as a group, totally understand each other's thinking on the subject. What are our expectations? Do we even understand what the community energy plan is about? What are our expectations in terms of having that looked at and reevaluated? And we've brought up several times, well, why don't we just talk about it for a little bit and see where we're all at and understand each other? And I appreciate very much the mayor's comments about the importance and the uniqueness of this plan and the fact of being the best. And I think historically that's been part of the discussion and the consideration as we've looked at the community energy plan and developed it. We wanted it to be the best. We wanted to be a leader and not a follower in energy conservation. And I think part of being the best involves collaboration and an mutual understanding of thought and clarity about what our expectations are or what our questions are. Do we talk about the stuff that we don't know? And when it comes to community energy plan, there's potential for a lot of stuff not to know about. So what I'm going to suggest is that we afford ourselves an opportunity to dedicate a little bit of time just to have a conversation among ourselves as to what our concerns, thoughts are in order to bring about that higher level of clarity. So I'm going to offer as a motion, Your Honor, the following. I move that the city council include in a study session at its earliest opportunity a discussion on the prioritized evaluation of the community energy plan, the effect of climate change concerns on that plan, and any expectations of the group charged with said community energy plan evaluation. And that's in the form of a motion.
All right. We've got a motion from Hoekstra. Is there support? Support by Garcia. Any discussion? Yeah, Mr. Trethewey.
Yes, sir. I move that the city council include in a study session at its earliest opportunity a discussion on the prioritized evaluation of the community energy plan, the effect of climate change concerns on that plan, and any expectations of the group charged with said community energy plan evaluation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, I have a comment.
Fire away.
Dave, I appreciate you bringing that up, and I agree with 90% of what you're saying. And I'm hoping I'm not interpreting what specifically your last statement is, but this council would do the city and the SEP injustice telling them what they're supposed to be doing. We can have expectations. I mean, we've got an expectation. We talked about, we did this 10 years ago. We're all part of it, and we're looking and saying, okay, we agree that 10 years, a lot's happened, a lot of water's been over the dam, so on and so forth. Maybe it's time to reevaluate. But I made a commitment in front of Jay and in front of some other people at one of the Coffees of Councils that I would entertain having this discussion, and I'm sticking by my word. But I'm hoping, and I'm just gonna lay it out there right now, I'm hoping it's not the intention of this group after that discussion to say, SEP, here's your marching orders.
May I respond to that?
Oh, certainly.
Okay. Brother Mike, I appreciate that sentiment, and that's exactly what I would expect. And it's also the expectation that I would have. I don't think any board or commission that has been charged with a task that we tell them, here's how you do your task. In other words, that we would dictate an expectation or an outcome rather than letting them do that. Probably the word expectations is throwing things off a little bit. It's probably not the best word. My intention with that statement was that as a result of our discussions, if there was any sort of, not an outcome, but an opportunity or I can't think of the right word, option that we might like to see. Not necessarily a recommendation, but here are some options that we're thinking about that we'd like to have maybe addressed in the evaluation. That would help us make decisions down the road in terms of other recommendations. So it isn't, I'm not asking for direct outcomes. I'm asking for possible recommendations as to options. Does that make sense?
Thank you for your clarification.
Okay.
With a group like this, with the minds that are there, if we start stifling creativity, we might as well just shut it down right now.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Yep.
Thank
Scott?
you, Dave.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, as a representative of that committee, yes, I wouldn't want definitive outcomes from this board to say, we're at 19 metric tons right now, we want to be down to 10. You know, that's the outcome we expect of this committee. I wouldn't want those definitive outcomes. I'd want us to explore ideas that you have that might help us reduce that carbon footprint, but certainly not definitive, measurable areas.
Any other comments, discussion? All right, Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Peters? Yes. Garcia?
Yes.
Trethewey?
Yes.
Arnthorst?
Yes.
Corbin?
Yes.
Hoekstra?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Mayor Box?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you. Any other appointments, motions, communications from council members? Yes, Jay?
Not want to extend the meeting, but There's been I was at a gathering the other day, and the conversation came up about Hope College and their plans to bring their complete student body back to the campus, representing, I don't know, 30 states in America. Someone mentioned something about the BPW might be involved in working with the college to understand some, if we looked at their discharge, you might be able to. I guess if there's some way, I don't want to do this right now, but if maybe in your Friday write-up, if whatever discussions are going on with the city and the college regarding their plans and our interacting with them and how these kids are going to come back and interact with our community. I'm all for it, don't get me wrong. But I know they've got some serious plans in place, and I'm assuming the city needs to have some protocols that go with that too. So just, like I said, we don't need it right now, but maybe sometime in the near future, give us an update on what discussions have taken place and what that looks like.
Sure. I do know that particularly the Department of Public Safety has had a lot of interactions with them. I've been on a couple calls with Hope College. I've heard the same thing. I haven't had a direct conversation with Dave or his team about that. I will say, so I'll share some information. I do know that Hope is looking to have kind of a release, and they were really looking to kind of release their plan to the community, and they kind of asked us to reserve that in some way. So I've been trying to figure out, okay, how do we do that while allowing Hope to kind of release their information to the community. So if it's okay, I'll have a conversation with Hope to make sure that the timing of that is done well. Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, and I'll make sure that as Keith follows up with you, he's got the information regarding BPW's involvement. What that refers to is there's some places in the country that have used wastewater testing of wastewater for COVID as a way of looking at general areas where there might be an emergence of a possible outbreak. And so I think what Hope is looking at there is the opportunity of getting some testing done by our facility, of some of that, so that they could, see if they've got something emerging. And so we've agreed to work with them on that. I don't know all the particulars of where the testing is taking place, if this is just a collection process with us. And I think it's fairly, just kind of in the development stages yet, but I'll get all the information to Keith so he can report that back to you.
Yeah. Just hearing you say that, I think, I don't know that the general public is aware that Hope has made some decisions. As a parent, I've listened to what their plans are and how the students are going to work, and they're handling it exceptionally well.
They are.
But another benefit of having our own power and discharge is even having that opportunity in that. And I think there's going to be some comfort to the community knowing that this is the city, the college, we're talking, we've got this. They're going to be downtown. What are we going to do? How's this going to work? I do think it hasn't really, the discussion hasn't amounted to much yet, but I do think as it gets closer, it's going to become a discussion that we could probably head off at the pass. So, thank you.
Yeah, so I time that. I'm glad you brought that up. In fact, I think that one of the timings is that Hope is going to do kind of a release. And I think they're doing it actually something with the West Coast Chamber. And that's going to be, so let me get that information and
Jay,
happy to share.
I can add to that a little bit as well, because I had a long conversation with President Skogan this week, and he shared some of that with me, but I want to honor that release of information that Hope wants to do as well. But their planning has been thoughtful, it is extensive, it is comprehensive. They are doing everything that they can think of to ensure the safety of their students and to ensure the safety of the residents of Holland as well. And I was very happy to hear about the collaboration that had been taking place between the college and the BPW and the city. So it's been great. I was very, very impressed by that. So I'm glad you brought that up, and hopefully we'll be able to get more information out to the public, because I think once the public hears it, they're going to be very comfortable with that as well. So any other communications? Yeah, Mike.
Just one final thing. This past Saturday, there was a Back the Blue rally at Holland Park, at Centennial Park. I think it was very well attended. It warmed my heart to see the support that our local police department had. It wasn't just the local police department, it was the first responders, the fire department, the sheriff's department. Fantastic to see that support. All the bad things that have been said about police and things lately, yeah, there are a couple of bad apples out there, but they're not all that way for sure. I'm not bashful at all with the support I have for our police department because they've earned every bit of my respect. I said to the chief the other day, I'm going to continue to support me until you give me reason not to. And that has not happened. I don't expect it to ever happen. So I just wanted to thank everybody that was out there, whether you couldn't be there or not. But it was great to see the number of people that were out there and supporting the police department.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Any other communications?
Just one small thing.
Yes, Nikki.
The Sustainability Committee met this last week for the first time since forever, since the COVID arrived. And it was supposed to be a small meeting just to set priorities, but people are excited. And I think this is nice with this community energy plan and strategic development team. You know, everything's kind of happening at once. We're starting to get back on track. So I think that's what's happening here. And so they'll do a number of things you'll hear about as time goes on now that they're resetting and reprioritizing. So just wanted to get you up to date.
Thank you, Nikki. Any other comments, communications? I have item number 16, first reading of ordinances, ordinance amendments, sections 14-5 through 14-13 of chapter 14 of the Holland Code of Ordinances. I believe that this is and Ron, you want to give me a hand on this? I think this is a possibility that we need to do in case we pass the ordinance 2 weeks from now. Am I understanding that correctly?
Exactly, but this was already taken care of, part of the consent agenda.
Oh, it was part of consent.
Right.
Okay, I saw the asterisk there, but it appeared here again, and I thought I want to make sure that I cover that. Great, good, thank you. Then there's just one more motion that I would entertain at this point.
Motion to adjourn.
Moved by Trethewey, support by Peters. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.